Aha!
Hello guys. How are you doing?
Thank you. So, actually, before we start, I've brought some cards. Now, I'm Norman Cook, Fatboy Slim. I have to preface everything I say today by saying I'm 49 years old. So I've been DJing for 31 years. So a lot of the DJ history is kind of before your time, and I will hark back to the old days. Now, if you think I'm being too old and always going on about the old days, I'd like to, you're probably aware of what this is. Right, this is what you hold up. If I'm being too old or grumpy about it's not like the old days, you get one each. I started DJing because I collected records, and in those days, the only way, there was no kind of Spotify or anything, you actually had to physically go out and buy the record to play it. So because I collected all the records, I got invited to parties. But this is like when we were 14, 15. Now, the records at the end of the night would be covered in vomit and cigarette ash. And so one day I said, somebody invited me to the party, and I said, okay, thanks for the invite, but I'm not bringing my records if that's okay. And they went, oh, we were only really inviting you for your records. And so I said, sorry. And this girl her parents were quite rich. So they said, if my dad hires these double decks, which in those days were an enormous great lump of machinery, then will you kind of DJ for us? And so I did, and I really enjoyed it. I loved playing my favourite records to people rather than just sitting in the corner going, this one. The kind of performance side of it really turned me on, and the crowd seemed to really enjoy it. Yeah, so then from then on, every time anyone had a party where I lived, they would hire the decks and I would go and play them. Well, in those days, DJing wasn't a career, it was a hobby. The DJs weren't valued enough that we got paid huge amounts of money. So we were just the person in the corner of the room who played records, and there wasn't that kind of the cult of the DJ. So in those days, every DJ, I'd play 5 nights a week, but still work in a record shop during the day to pay the rent. In those days, the only way to actually make a living out of it was to be in a band. Yeah, after a sort of 15-year kind of warm-up of trying being in pop bands, trying to play bass, trying to play guitar, I realised that just me and a sampler or me and a pair of decks was what people really wanted. That was around the time that I started being called Fatboy Slim. Ever since then, it's kind of engulfed the DJing side of it, and that was when dance music started to get out of the clubs and onto the radio and into festivals. There was one moment in my career, there was a festival in Brighton called the Essential Festival, and in those days I had a club called the Big Beat Boutique, which was quite a small club in Brighton, and we had this style of music that wasn't house, it was kind of acid house mixed with hip hop, but the club only held like 300 people, but we had this tent that held 1,200 people, and we thought, is this going to work? But then we realised that if you took the 300 people who didn't come every week, put them all in one tent, get them really drunk, and then play our biggest anthems, then it becomes the sum of this excitement. Felt like a gig rather than just DJing at a nightclub. And that was when my manager went, I think we're onto something. I prepared a very long and thorough lecture for you. So we're coming on to the audio-visual side. Just some basic rules of DJing. They're all fairly self-explanatory, but rule number 1, never wear shoes. Obviously, you can wear shoes if you're more comfortable. For me, I discovered one night when I was playing in Brazil a lot and it was just too hot to wear shoes, I discovered that I was just that bit more comfortable, and I just kind of felt like I danced better. So but also, over the years, people have known me, go, oh yeah, you're the one who DJs with no shoes on. And it's become a bit of a kind of shtick. So if there's anything like the way you wear your headphones or some part of you that you're more comfortable, if that makes you look different from other DJs, then people will remember that. Obviously you can't base a career on not wearing shoes, but it's just like it becomes part of your personality. Second is probably the most important one. If I had to think of the difference between a DJ that I enjoyed watching and one that I didn't, it's whether they look up at you. Because some DJs spend the whole evening like this. And which is probably great for what they're doing technically. But it's so much better a DJ who's going like that and going, you liking that, you liking that? And it immediately warms yourself. It gives you like 50% more empathy with the crowd. And if you think about all the best DJs, your Carl Coxes and David Guettas, they're always looking at the crowd. Also, it's a really good way of knowing how you're getting on, because if you're just hunched over doing some really technical thing that you've practiced in your bedroom, you don't really know whether or not the crowd are getting off on it. Eye contact with the crowd, I think, is one of the most powerful. It's probably more important than your mixing skills, because you're there to have a communication with them, to share a common experience through the music, and you've got to feel like you've got to make them think that you're their friend, and vice versa. And there is a certain look that you get from people where they're looking at you just saying, I'm really enjoying this. And you go, yeah, I'm really enjoying this too. And then they look at you and it's like, isn't it great that we can just do this? Like, yeah, isn't it? Yeah. And the fact that I'm communicating with you, that just makes it even better, doesn't it? And all of that is just in one look and you're just looking at each other and nodding. But it's that kind of, and it's international as well, doesn't matter what language you speak. Rule 3, very important, you must always be 20% drunker than the crowd. Or that could be 20% drunker than the crowd, 20% higher than the crowd, having 20% more fun than the crowd. Number 4, number 4 is optional. You don't have to wear Hawaiian shirts. It worked for me. Hawaiian shirts might not be in fashion this year, but they will be again next year. 5, shout at people often. This might not work for you. I mean, you all seem a lot of DJs can be quite nervous, and I do appreciate the reason that a lot of us became DJs was because we loved the music, but we didn't want to be the one standing there singing or playing guitar. But having said that, I think there's times when if things are going wrong or well, it's nice to have a bit of a shout, because if the crowd at the front who can hear it will get off on it, and the people at the back will go, what's he on about? You can shout absolutely anything. But it's nice, it's a good way of conducting the crowd. Number 6, get slapped before show times. This one again is optional, but before I go on stage every night, Alan, my tour manager, last thing he does before I go on stage, he gives me a really hard slap around each cheek. Okay, we ready? There you go. It really gets the blood pumping. Yeah, any little ritual that gets you in the mood. And 7th is the most probably important and the only one that I'm really serious about. Know your tunes and love your tunes. I probably don't need to tell any of that. But knowing your tunes is really important, because I've seen DJs and just kind of totally go to pieces and change the mood by mistake or just panic. If you know your tunes, then it reduces panic. There'll probably still be moments where you look down and just go, fuck, which one next? Well, this is my process when I get sent a tune. So the first thing I do, here's one little cheat which may or may not interest you. Most of this, I found that the average tempo that I play at is 128 BPM. And then I found that when I'm editing tunes, in Ableton, it's really easy to make them go 128 BPM. And then I thought, well, if everything in my box is going at 128 BPM, it means you don't have to spend half the evening getting in sync. And once they're in sync, you know they're going to stay in sync. So over the years, I gradually, just basically every tune I have now goes 128 BPM, which no one seems to notice. Some tunes you think, oh right, maybe crank it up a bit, but it just saves you so much time in mixing if you know that everything goes at the same tempo if you're on naught. I really like doing drops of really well-known tunes that you don't think you'd get away with playing the whole tune, or you don't really like to play the whole tune. It's just, you just drop it and everyone thinks, oh, he's going to play that. And then you go back to what you were playing before. You know White Noise by Disclosure? Great tune, everyone loves it, but in my sets it kind of sounds a bit lightweight and deep. But I wanted to kind of quote it, and you know it'll get a cheer, even if you're not going to play the whole tune. And with that one, I did try beefing it up. I tried like putting a heavier kick drum and more percussion on it, but it is kind of, it's a deep little groovy tune rather than a kind of all-out banger. So the drum beat at the beginning, I just nicked one of my sort of generic house beats, which was sitting well with what I was already playing, and it's got a bit more thump to it. And then I needed to get a way to get from that into the riff, so I dropped something really well known just for a bit, about here.
I want your body, everybody wants your body, so let's check.
And then that way I don't have to play the whole of Jack because everyone's heard it and it's quite sort of, it's quite pondery. So that way, yeah, just at the moment when everyone goes, oh, I want your body, so there's Jack, then you hit him with the riff. And then, if you remember, the other problem we had was we didn't think it really took off with the drums. So once we established that, I brought in my own extra drum beat, which will come in just about here. Yeah, then I was thinking it's getting quite acidy and old schooly, so we'd put an old school drum fill in. So that's the old one. And here's where I thought, well, let's go back to the intro because nothing much has happened. So I go back to the dropping out the drums, which I think I do like 3 times rather than the initial one, because I figure that's the bit that's really going to get the crowd going. Guest appearance of White Noise. Again, just to get people recognise it and go, hey, and then it's like you don't have to play the whole tune. It's like that. Quite like that sort of bassy breakdown. And then, yeah, so then we go back to dropping down to the riff on its own like we did at the beginning. And then that whole process, kind of all these edits, once everything's in a grid. Also, I do everything in 4s and 8s and 16s, because that way you can kind of, if you're counting in your head, most things don't have, it's like, oh, we do that for 8 bars, we do that for 16 bars. So that way I kind of know in my head probably what's going on. So most of these edits will be in nice, easy chunks. And yeah, sort of top and tail it so you know you can get into it and out of it at the end. And that whole process took about 35 minutes probably. And then that now goes into my serato, and now every time I play it, I know I've got an easy way to get into it, easy way to get out, and it's kind of got the hooks that I want in the set. And it's going at the right tempo to mix with everything else. Thank you.
Fatboy Slim just did a pretty awesome lecture, which was very inspiring for me because I'm produced before, and now he made it look very simple. So now I want to produce.
Inspiring person, really inspiring person.
Down to earth, really professional.
Totally.
Good advice.
Thank you, congratulations, you're all winners, and thanks for listening. Cool.